With Savage being out for a week now, with this video I want to be taking a look at the pulse of the current state of balance. And if you're on this video, I suspect you do too. So with numbers from Pandaemonium and Savage coming in, I figured that about a week later, it was about time that we talked about the balance of all the DPS numbers from all of the roles, and without the hand-waving nonsense of feels over reals, but instead the numbers taken directly from FF logs. Something a bit more objective than Paladin is dead, the world is on fire, and everything is gone to shit. If you want the short version of it, which obviously is gonna, miss a lot of details we want to talk about here, the numbers are pretty astoundingly well balanced with a few general outliers. In other words, you can actually pick and play what you want without really worrying about it being bad. It's going to come mostly down to how you personally pilot that job. All jobs have been successfully clearing the second part of P4S in week 1. With minimum extra gear. So back by popular demand though, before we get into the data, is as always, if this video helps you at all or entertains you or you like the data, I hope that you consider dropping a thick and juicy parse on my like button and cat daddy that subscribe button. So beyond that general short sentiment, let's get into the details where things do start to make general outliers and trends. So we are going to define an outlier as any job with their DPS being 6% or more lower than the top DPS in their category. So we're talking about Dancer here at the 75th percentile is 10.4% lower than Reaper. I'm going to highlight the outliers in red, namely the outliers, the consistent outliers across all the percentiles other than minimum, which is just here more for completeness sake. I wouldn't rely on that data too much, but we are looking at the outliers being Bard, Machinist, Dancer, and Paladin across all of these, where the damage disparity between these DPS, such as Reaper at the absolute top, and then any range physical DPS is significantly larger than the damage disparity between something like Paladin or Dark Knight, even though I am classifying Paladin as an outlier there too, by definition of it being 6% or higher. Let's dive into the data. At the 75th percentile for healers, we can see that the healers are honestly extremely well balanced. They're all under 5% of one another, with Sage taking up the lead, followed by White Mage and Scholar being neck and neck, and then Astro just the slightest touch behind them. Honestly, healers are extremely well balanced. Numbers wise, before White Mages come at me with MP concerns, trust me, I know, I don't disagree. I know, please don't come at me. For the tanks, we can see that the Dark Knight and the Gunbreaker, roughly a single minuscule percentage different from one another, followed then by Warrior, and then Paladin a little bit behind that. And I have a lot to say about the Paladin, especially since I do consider it to be the tank that I plan to play whenever I tank in any content, and yes, I do mean that. Paladin, I love it. I love it so much, this expansion. I adore the Paladin, but this is totally not the video for that. Paladin is factually numbers-wise bringing up the caboose by 6%. Now, changing our attention to the DPS category, we can see that the Reaper is absolutely leading the charge at every single percentile other than the absolute maximum percentiles, where Monk is finally taking the lead and breaking past second place. The Reaper and Monk are brutally fighting for that. From there, it is really a toss-up between Black Mage, Samurai, Dragoon, and Ninja, really at each other's throats for that third spot, and they're kind of like, between the different percentiles, they're like going back and forth. Now, past all those jobs, we're looking at the Red Mage and the Summoner making up to the quote-unquote caboose so far, which is then getting into what I was talking about earlier, which is Bard, Machinist, and Dancer are honestly at a race to the bottom. Honestly, guys, I mean, look at the numbers, where Bard is over 6% lower than the max DPS, and that is the best of that category. It only gets worse with Dancer pushing like 11%. So Bard is 6% lower than the maximum DPS, which is usually Reaper, and then Machinist is next up, taking that 3% further at a 9% lower, and then Dancer is over 10% lower, making absolute rear of the DPS category. So in terms of the DPS categories, we're looking at the melee DPS in general being the best of the best, honestly. We are looking at Reaper and Monk clearly at the absolute forefront, with Samurai trailing a little bit behind. Dragoon and Ninja are then comfortably neck and neck. The general idea that melee DPS bring the most DPS of all the DPS is very much alive and well from these numbers. Now for caster DPS, we can see that the Black Mage is right up there fighting the Dragoon, Samurai, and Ninja, but Summoner and Red Mage are a significant bit lower than that, which makes sense. They bring revive, and so don't you need to at least pay something for that. And arguably, when you look at the red mage's selection rate, you wonder, are they paying enough for that? No, I am not saying nerf the red mage. No, I am not. No, before I get the comments, I'm not saying that. I am only asking the question. Please don't hurt me. Now, behind all of them, as we just said, is the physical range DPS category. Ugh, say that 7 times twice. And that is taking the absolute most severe DPS penalty hit. And note, this is at the 75th percentile. These are all really, really, really good players. We are not seeing players just snafu their rotation or whatever. These are all very, very good players. They are not only clearing the first week, but able to also score a high parse. So it is not a player or pilot problem here. They are just very low DPS tuning right now. But you can now make the argument if utility is why these are lower, but that doesn't make sense. It really just flat out doesn't make sense. Machinist is lower than Bard, and Machinist isn't bringing any utility above and beyond the basic role action that all of them get, which is 10% mitigation. Bard and Answer gets that. To me, Machinist is actually a big outlier and a big concern here, and it's a bit harder to justify. And even if you look at my channel banner art, I love the Machinist. Like, this is painful to see. But one thing that will ring true from the data is everything is within 10%, other than Dancer, of one another, where the Dancer is obviously worse, the Machinist is sure pushing it. But this generally means things in 14 are pretty balanced. Like, if your team is worried about taking a ninja over a samurai and trying to tell Naruto in your team to swap, even though Naruto really loves being a ninja, well, making them swap from something they're comfortable and have played for years for a potential 3% more DPS gain. Remember, these are people parsing at the 75th percentile. These people know and probably love the absolute heck out of what they're playing. But asking Naruto to change may get more DPS 3%, but it might also just completely flop on its face. So moving on from those numbers, let's look instead at different numbers, which is the clear rates data that I'm going to yard us rate up in the second phase of P4S. I'm not going to look at the earlier ones. I'm looking specifically at the second stage of P4S being cleared. So this is any data uploaded to FF logs for the second phase of the final current Savage boss. So I'm just sorting the data in Google Sheets here, and we can see some very, very profoundly clear winners for Reaper, Bard, Red Mage that are absolute leaps and bounds, unquestionable leaps and bounds ahead of everything else. For the healers, we can see an extremely profound preference for Scholar, followed by White Mage and then Sage, but far, far, far behind any of the other healers, literally very far, as you can see from the numbers there, is Astro at the absolute lowest of 30. But they are still obviously doing it week 1 clear, so I wouldn't drop your Astro just yet. Don't read too much into that. Don't start kicking your Astro just because of this. God, can I disclaimer that enough? I don't even know. For the tanks, we can see the Gunbreaker is making up the lead alongside Dark Knight. Oh boy, people that took dungeon content for tanks pretty seriously early might want to rethink Dark Knight being dead. Far from it, clearly. This is then followed up by Warrior at 3rd place, and then most notably is Paladin making up the least. But the Paladin is still represented decently at 103 clears. It's not scaring me like the ones we're about to talk to though, which are all of the jobs under 100 clears so far. And note, this might not mean so much about viability as much as the people that are very much doing like this kind of focus clear want to play. So I wouldn't read too much into this. It would be better I will do a follow-up in like a month from now, because we do know that the people currently clearing the full tier in like week 1 are most notably like streamers, big name YouTubers, people who either are making this like their full-time job or have taken like extensive holidays off from work if they could get them. This is very, very select few groups, so it could indicate their personal preferences for things, so don't read too far into this. My disclaimers am I going to say? I just don't want people to take my video out of context. That's like the opposite of what I'm trying to do. But I do believe in some cases it does indicate concern when combined with the previous numbers we just talked about. But I think like Astro's fine, for instance, but I digress. To avoid getting into the intricacies of balance of these jobs in this video, which I don't think would be appropriate, the combination of lower DPS and lack of utility made something like Machinist a very hard to justify pick for many. The Dancer, while it does bring solid utility, mobility, mitigation options, especially for DPS, actually the Dancer brings a lot, the almost 11% lower DPS, as we pointed out clearly before, is simply flat out considered unacceptably low by these groups, clearly from the data. You don't need to tell me your actions are speaking way louder than words. Dancer's in a rough spot, regardless of what it brings. Anyhow, this brings me to the conclusion of this video, where I really just want to get a pulse on the current state of balance, which has been like after a week of the Savage tier. And if you're on this video, I suspect you do too, and hopefully I was able to elucidate some of the mist and clear up some things. But anyhow, that really does it for this video, and as always, if this video helped you, I really hope that you consider dropping a thick and juicy cat tatty on that subscribe button. Anyhow, take care everyone, have a great day.